Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Barber's Brief. If you're a new listener, Mark and I like to use this forum to discuss things that have caught our eye in the news or could be studies, anything like that over the last couple of weeks. We like to highlight a case study or a marketing moment like we like to define, and of course go through our ad of the week. So things that really caught our eye, essentially. So really excited about today's episode. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great.
Right?
Hot and
It's
fresh
snowing
out of
again.
Monday morning. It's snowing again. It was inevitable, but it's snowing again.
We had a great run there for a second.
I know. 14 degrees, then to snow.
Then just snow. That's
Yeah.
just Calgary, man.
What? Yeah, it's just snow in the summer. What do you got in the news, V?
All right. So I came across this really interesting article in, what's the site called? Search Engine Land. Sorry. The title got me. I'm not going to lie here. Brand recognition trumps ranking. So new SEO data reveals consumer trust patterns. So
Okay.
hear me. I have five points here, just quickly.
Okay.
So a new survey from Page One Power reveals that brand familiarity, not ranking position, drives search clicks. Consumers are twice as likely to click on brands that they recognize versus top-ranked results, with 59% of Americans prioritizing familiar brands, while only 1/3 click on the number one result.
Interesting.
This is contrary to what a lot of people believe, right? Dominating that number one position, etc. Trust remains the foundation of effective SEO, confirming that brand building isn't just marketing jargon, but essential strategy. Nearly half of searchers trust organic results over paid ads, with men and millennials especially skeptical of advertising. The third point was click motivations vary by generation. Baby boomers and Gen X respond to compelling headlines, while millennials and Gen Z prioritize review and ratings. Though only 12% fully trust search results, over half of Americans consider search engines their most reliable information source, while Google dominating across all demographics. Which is interesting. I didn't expect that. I know Google still somewhat dominates, but I know there's been this big shift, especially for Gen Z, they use more in-platform search results, right? If you think about like the TikToks, Reddit, it's becoming a very powerful search engine as well. So maybe it's still in that infancy state and still gaining momentum. The fourth point, only 25% view Google as having monopolistic power, while nearly half of users would prefer more diverse viewpoints and other results rather than increased personalization. This is an interesting thing. I know we've talked about personalization ad nauseum, but it's one of those things where now it's like, is it really about personalization? Don't think so. And finally, this data just reinforces that building recognizable brands that connect with target audiences remains fundamentally to SEO success, regardless of business size.
It's funny, when you said the title, I was thinking Trump.
Donald Trump?
Yeah. That brand recognition trumps ranking.
Yeah.
I thought somehow it was the search
Oh,
engine
boy.
results of Donald Trump. Interesting.
Yeah. What do you have?
It kind of makes sense. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that you're kind of like, well, yeah, that totally makes sense. Because
Totally.
it also is interesting from my perspective. Like you recognize brands, and so you look for those brands. But I do think top page probably matters a lot. There's rare occasions
Yeah,
when I
of
go
course.
second, third, fourth page. And then the other one would be that, from my perspective, I think it's interesting that the way I search is different now, and I didn't know that I would have search differently until things like GPT and Claude and all those things are popping up, because it's different kinds of searches for different kinds of things.
You bring up such a great point.
It's interesting. Like I didn't really, before when it was just Google, I didn't really think about it. And now
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I do different things when I'm searching.
Well, it also goes back to I'll just quickly end on this, but we always were told, how do you make sure you're dominating the SERP, right?
Right.
And paid be really becoming part of that strategy. What it's suggesting here is like, focus on those brand building activities, and people will bypass a lot of those paid search and look for you likely more organically. So what that does is now you're investing less on your branded keywords, right? And you're trying to, again, reposition your product through a conquesting or generic strategy instead, because the theory here is like people are just going to come find you anyway. So don't worry about it. Even though, again, we will go against a lot of what the best practices that, a lot of these large, like the Googles of the world,
Yeah.
are going to be preaching, where it's like, no, sit on the
Yeah.
brand keywords. So
Yeah. I mean, it
just
ignores
further evidence.
Yeah, it ignores the idea that Google is the primary form of finding things. It ignores that we have memory,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you find?
Okay. Clear briefs. I have a kind of a theme with mine.
Okay.
stories and then leading into the ad of the week. But so clear briefs help marketers confront the chaos of advertising. So it was an interesting article from Helen Edwards at Marketing Week.
Okay.
So she talks about the importance, but the elusiveness of great creative. There's a relationship between brand and agency that's critical. Like we talked to Karen and Morgan about that actually.
Such a great episode, by the way.
Yeah, that was a great episode. Briefs, the idea around briefs being clear with a few objectives, not all kinds of, don't throw the kitchen sink in there. And an aligned collaborative team. One of the challenges that briefs often break down at the beginning because there's a poorly defined problem. So how do you create a great ad campaign as a poorly defined problem? In contrast, something like by targeting X segment across the 4 Ps, we expect to gain Y in incremental customers, leading to a Z market share growth and AA additional profit in BB amount of time. It's a lot of alphabet letters there, but you get my point. It's very specific when you do it that way. It's more challenging when you do it that way. But when you have something that says, how do we create a great ad campaign? You start from that perspective. The challenge largely is because there's fuzziness in that kind of problem statement. And since there's never one right answer, anything will work. So then you end up with really loose, creative approaches that doesn't really particularly solve a problem. So I just thought it was a really interesting study or comment around creative and how important a brief is. And then zeroing in on that problem to solve and making sure everybody's clear on that, because it really does make a huge difference.
Oh man, does it ever. I know we've talked about the Better Briefs Project, I think a few times on the podcast over the years.
Those guys.
Yeah, and again, I know we were just talking about Rethink, but I know they also have a great brief framework as well that they use. And it can really unlock incredible opportunity, right? If you do it the right way. And like you said, you can't just be adding noise for the sake of adding noise, because there's a lot of things that you kind of lose the plot in. So anyways, refocusing and making sure that you're being very succinct as possible, I think is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. What else you got?
Okay. So Adalytics, you've heard of them, haven't you? That watchdog kind of like, little bit.
It sounds familiar, but I don't really know much about it.
So they went public with first name client partnership as well. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So in a significant shift from its secretive client practices in the past, AdTech watchdog Adalytics has formally announced Quad Graphics and its Rise media agency as paying clients. Adalytics is known for its controversial investigation into AdTech failures and brand safety issues. Adalytics will now provide Quad with automated log file analysis, custom research, and measurement tools for client campaigns. So now what makes this specifically notable is the absence of typical confidentiality clauses that prevent direct client communication. So if Adalytics discovers issues with Quad and Quad refuses to address, they maintain the right to approach clients directly, a practice that has been previously frustrated many agencies and ad tech executives who prefer private resolution channels. Now, Quad's media president, Joshua Locock, cites Adalytics' buy-side only business model is a key attraction, noting that companies serving both advertisers and publishers may face mixed incentives and limited accountability. Now, the partnership aims to implement protocols reducing non-human traffic exposure and enhance media transparency through rigorous evaluation standards. Now, finally, the announcements also coincides with Adalytics' ongoing working investigating ads served to declare bots, research that has already drawn criticism from the industry players like DoubleVerify. The watchdog's recent report exposing brand advertisements alongside child sexual abuse material, which prompted U.S. Senate investigation, underscores the high-stakes nature of the transparency-focused approach to industry reform. There's a lot of just blah here, but the reality is it's really interesting to see the direction Adalytics is going, and I think this is where it's raising some questions as to, how it's going to continue to operate kind of in that secrecy state where you're being made more aware upfront about issues as practitioners. Whereas in the past, these reports would come out and you were just stuck shaking your head. So it'll be interesting how this actually helps the industry now moving forward.
There's the more and more I think about it, the more and more I realize there's so much black box stuff happening with all digital things.
Yeah.
As much as you'd like to think everything, it's a giant amount of.
Yeah. And it feels like every vendor now
has... maybe I don't know if that's what you would call, but proprietary technology that just you'll never know about.
Totally. And every vendor has some version of their own Google PMax thing now.
Yeah.
And it's always, this is the best thing that you could do. That's what you keep hearing. But again, where are those ads going? Notoriously Performance Max, they wouldn't issue impression reports. You wouldn't know what sites, your ads were coming out on, et cetera. And anyways, it's really interesting. I don't know what to think, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I remember thinking about when I first started working in media. I remember going to meet with clients and they would say things like, "Oh, I'm using newspaper because I know when my ads are in the paper because I can see them, and then people cut them out and they bring them in, and you just don't have that visibility anymore."
No,
it's so interesting. Yeah. Guess what, Pete?
What?
Nobody and everybody cares about AI.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's this, I found this, Fiverr actually did a report on generative AI usage within 3,300 freelancers that work with the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at how freelancers use AI over the year, I think this is an annual report, but this year compared to last year over year, usage increases. The most used tools among the experts they surveyed was ChatGPT, Midjourney, Firefly, Quillbot, Hugging Face, and Gemini. I never heard of Hugging Face or Quillbot or Firefly. No, Firefly is Adobe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of makes sense. GPT is the one that everybody uses, so probably has the biggest market share. Midjourney, I've never personally used that. Gemini, I'm using more and more, I would say. Most growth from freelancers are the ones that are using it the most is in programming, tech, music, and audio.
Mm-hmm.
The most common tasks that people use it for, text and content generation at 40%. 19% with visuals and art, and 18% with data analysis. Subscriptions are on the rise. So there's more than a third of freelancers are paying for some kind of subscription with one of these different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And while there's a lot of optimism, there's also a lot of skepticism, particularly when it comes to concerns for accuracy and quality, and then also legal, copyright, and privacy issues.
Let me ask you this. Are you using Gemini more because you're using it as a part of your phone?
No.
Oh, so you're using desktop?
Yeah, it's funny because I just got a new phone recently.
Okay.
And I put Perplexity on it.
Okay.
But I haven't actually used Perplexity yet on my phone. But I use Gemini. I don't know why I use Gemini. It just somehow comes to mind whenever I don't. Like if I'm on, I use Chrome. I use ChatGPT. I used to use it all the time. And then more and more I'm using Claude.
You got to thank Paul Durbin for that.
Yeah. 2%.
So just looking at this, so I have used Midjourney in the past, don't really use it at all from a day-to-day perspective. I think I too lean closer to Claude more than I did in the past. I'm surprised not to see Copilot here, to be honest with you. Because unless it's rolled up under the ChatGPT, because that is basically what Copilot is based off of ChatGPT.
Yeah. But it's for freelancers, so maybe there could be leanings towards
That's a good point.
The natural
platforms that just exist. Writing, if I'm not mistaken, specifically.
But don't you need to have a Microsoft Office subscription to get into Copilot?
No. It's interesting to see Quillbot. Quillbot is an interesting one because I think that one's for writers specifically. So then when I saw the 40% text and content generation, I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's a lot of tools out there. Obviously, I think picking something that suits what you need. I think I jump between ChatGPT and and Claude more and more now. I think now I skew more Claude than I do ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But and I also pay for a subscription as well.
For Claude?
Yeah. I'm trying it out for a month. Yeah, it's been kind of like it. I can see why Paul Durbin loves it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It's really good.
So it's like something like 63% of all the freelancers are using something. That's up 5% since last year's.
That's insane.
It's become 2/3 of everybody's using it. And so it's kind of one of those things. And so this will lead into the ad of the week that I've got later. But
sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody's using it, but also everyone's got the same kind of challenges with it.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of different tools that exist out there, but it's kind of just embedded in everything. So we're still just trying to get work done, which is their point.
Yeah.
which is why they're saying nobody cares. But there's a huge number of tools that everybody's using.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense. I like that. That's good.
What
It's
else?
time for the marketing moment with me.
Okay.
Okay. So, did you ever download the Contagious IQ? Basically, the breakthrough ideas of 2024, where Contagious does this like full review of 2024, etc., best campaigns and stuff like that.
I read.
Did you ever see that?
I don't know if I did the 2024 one, but I definitely did the 2023.
Yeah. So, well, because the 2023 one was so good, I'm like, I waited for the 2024 one. And in it, they actually have a feature from one of the partners that I think that kind of helps from Dentsu specifically. And it's basically talk about trends that's shaping 2025. So the title is Fragment Forward, 5 Key Trends Shaping 2025. So I thought this was an interesting read, and I'll get into the why in a sec. So I'll cover a few things. Dentsu's Creative 2025 Trend Report reveals a fragmented world where orderly thinking about eras, generations, and movements no longer applies. In this landscape of fewer shared experiences, but unlimited access to human content, we see traditional patterns overlapping with repeating in unexpected ways. That's the whole lead up, if you will. Okay. So the 5 critical trends is the good enough life. Consumers are redefining success with younger generations prioritizing financial freedom and work-life balance over long-term goals. The underconsumption movement celebrates making do while rest emerges as a radical act in a burnout culture. And I think we've seen that because we've been thinking like we grew up very much, hustle, work for what you get, etc. So I don't know, you can't really get it out of me either. I think like that's just the way I think and I operate. I don't know. Maybe it's too late for me. It's too late for me. Anyways, and second critical trend was the togetherness deficit. So fragmented media, lockdown periods, and remote work have created widespread loneliness, with 43% of those lacking shared spaces reporting no close friends. This has spurred innovations from online communities to AI companions like a friend necklace. That's a little concerning. Number 3, generation blur. Age no longer predicts behavior or preferences. Middle-aged adults launch silver startups while delaying aging. Gen Alpha rushes toward adulthood with digital savvy, and intergenerational living becomes increasingly common as housing costs rise.
No, it's just the Gen Alpha rushes toward out. I feel like my kids are kind of in that. I don't even know what category they're in. Yeah. I think I have one in Alpha and one in Z. But they're not old. Like they're my 12-year-old, but she somehow is, I think, mature beyond what she should be because she watches so much content from older people. And then there's all these influencers, and so she's like mimicking behavior, but I don't think she really understands what the behavior is sometimes.
Right. That's interesting. The fourth one was Curiouser and Curiouser. So global communication enables cultural cross-pollination, satisfying our hunger for the unexpected amid algorithmic sameness. Entertainment properties transcend borders, while over-tourism triggers new sustainability measures. And finally, algorithms and blues. Our algorithmically curated world risks creating more of the same, reinforcing biases and bubbles. Brands must navigate a landscape where vibe checking trumps fact checking, and AI-generated content becomes ubiquitous.
Vibe checking.
Checking. So those are the five main trends that are coming out of 2025, or start going into 2025. Yeah. Now, what are some of those several shifts or the emerging in consumer behavior in society? So I have 6 here that I kind of was able to decipher, if you will. So the first one is like, we're moving away from orderly, predictable patterns in society. Traditional boundaries between generations, eras, and movements are blurring, with old and new cultural elements overlapping and coexisting. You and I have talked about this. Like, it's less about targeting a generation. You're trying to find either, category entry points or buying habits that then would decipher that there's interest in a product or a service. Like, it's less about, hey, this is for Gen X, or this is for this customer profile. It's needs-based marketing. And I think that we're seeing this here, and I love that we're being proven true. There we go. Look at us. Number 2, people are redefining success and happiness in their own terms. Many are rejecting traditional achievements metrics in favor of good enough living that prioritizes well-being, financial freedom, and present enjoyment over long-term striving. again, I think if you think about like our generation that kind of grew up with this, even though I think we have this kind of Freedom 55 kind of thing in the back of our heads, so how do you make sure you work enough and hard enough up until that point where you can then actively make that decision, where it's like, okay, now I'm in, my mid 50s, late 50s. Now I can just kind of go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Now it's like they're living the present, living the moment. So that I think has a different connection that when you're thinking about your advertising, your marketing as well. A significant togetherness deficit exists. It was upsetting to see this one, to be honest with you. But when you think about the fragmented media consumption, remote work, and decreased shared physical spaces is leading to this widespread loneliness and disconnection. So again, do you have a product or service that can really lean into the positive side of how you can bring people together? Definitely more in a physical state, I think I think it is changing the way people consume and think about how they open their circles, unfortunately. Similar to the earlier point about, the predictability around patterns in society is like age is becoming less relevant as a predictor of behavior. So when we're seeing like older generations are launching startups and it goes a long way, I guess, in resisting things like aging, while Gen Alpha is maturing a lot quicker than we maybe did in the past.
Yeah.
With more advanced digital skills, intergenerational living is increasingly common. And intergenerational living is really popular in Europe, where you would have,
Asia too.
Right, and Asia, where you'd have a lot of people, parents living on the first floor, kids then second, third, fourth floors, and they would have these generational homes where that was just normal, and they were always together. But that does so much for those that are seniors when they're in so close proximity with their family. It actually helps with things like longevity as well. The growing tension between algorithm curation and authentic discovery. Now, while algorithms streamline content delivery, they risk creating homogeneity and reinforcing biases, prompting a hunger for unexpected culture experiences. We can see this already. Just look at LinkedIn. How many people are writing about the same thing? There's a lot less of that unique thought, that thought process that can kind of like there's more thought leaders, but I know a lot of those thought leaders are likely curating a lot of their content through AI means, which is creating a lot of similar content, which is unfortunately. And the last one is just like AI generated content is moving from a novelty to ubiquity with significant implications for brand distinctiveness, SEO, and content curation strategies. So for brands, the challenge is navigating this fragmented landscape. While traditional demographic targeting is less effective, shared cultural touchpoints are fewer, and connecting authentically with consumers requires understanding their desire for both community and individuality.
It's an interesting time for sure. There's so many of the things that are highlighted here. I can see in my day-to-day life. Like I work remotely.
Yep.
My wife works remotely. The kids are, as that example I was giving you.
Yeah.
You see the AI proliferation everywhere. I mean, I get it. There's definitely a shift happening. Totally. And I'm sure will lead overall to bigger changes in consumer behavior and
100%.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. It's interesting.
All right, ad of the week.
Okay, V, here I'm gonna pop up for everyone who is interested. You can not zoom. You can go
zoom. The old Mazda commercials.
You can go over to the YouTube channel and see what I'm about to show you. But it's the ad of the week, right? I'm going to make this big. So this is Nobody Cares, the musical by Fiverr.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because it's based on that research they did. Also from their in-house team created this, which makes sense. They have a whole bunch of freelancers. And so it was based off the insight from that report that they did where their argument is that nobody cares. Everyone's got it. Everyone's using AI, but nobody really cares. And so they're promoting the benefits of hiring real people, real freelancers, which makes sense for them because that's entirely what their business is. So here, I'll just play this real quick. That's amazing.
It's really good.
It's really funny. Yeah.
That is really good.
Yeah. So it's, I just thought it was kind of clever. There's a whole bunch of things in there that apparently the CEO is one of the people. There's an influencer in there. I didn't recognize the guy's name, but just a great example, kind of building off what you were talking about with humor last week or 2 weeks ago. And it's a B2B ad, which is totally radical. I would say this type of a commercial for a B2B company.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's really interesting about how just using, like, we all are obsessed about AI, but it's a good point. Like, nobody cares that we're using AI. We still need to get the work done.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I thought, well, it's really creative. I love anything that comes from an insight that's being built then as a byproduct of that. So you could tell like there's some method to this. Yeah, such a great example. We'll make sure we'll add the show in the show notes, the links for those that maybe don't want to pop over to the video. You can watch it on your own time too. But yeah, it was a great one. Yeah. All right. Coming up next week, what do we have?
We've got Paul Dervin.
We've Claude AI himself.
Paul.ai.
Paul.ai. Yeah.
The head of brand at Miro, who was on talking about managing SaaS brands.
Oh my God. Yeah.
In a time of like, that we're in, but also he's done tons and tons of work experimenting with AI personally, just to see what it does and how it works and how you can use it. And there's so many great insights in that conversation.
Oh man. I remember like he talked like practical AI applications that we as marketers can use. I'm trying to go through my notes here. Some of even the limitations.
Yeah.
That pose from AI. Anyways, it's such an incredible conversation.
Yeah.
I think everyone will find it really, really topical and current. So yeah, tune in next week. It's a great episode.
Awesome.
Do we ever do a bad episode? We never do a bad episode.
Never. Never once.
Always bangers.
We only deliver quality.
Exactly. And with that...
Yeah, well, thanks for keeping us in your ears, everybody.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks for keeping us in your ears. Yeah. And just watching the snow come down, it's insane.
I know. Well, yeah, those are little flakes of profit.
Profit flakes on a Monday morning. What else do you need?
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Go take on the day.
Yep. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right. Check it.